talking about the good today. Oh, is that backwards?
The American Begins.
The Adventure
The
Begins.
Adventure Begins. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that very well. Obviously, let me try again. What does it say on the other side? The Adventure Begins. I can see now because I made the screen larger.
Gentleman's Hardware. That's just the company that makes it. But when I didn't understand why God was calling me out of the ministry, and we were driving back up, my wife got me this. She said, "We don't know yet, but this is what we do know: the adventure begins."
Oh man!
So I thought we'd spend our whole life in
California,
California, and Santa Cruz.
Surprise, surprise! You're back in Spokane.
Yeah, and then God was like, "Left turn." And I don't understand. And my wife's point was, you don't have to understand. It's an adventure. That's not how adventures work.
Oh, why are you starting there? All right. How do adventures work?
Well, that's are you all caught up? Did you read?
Yeah, I am actually. I caught up. I read through last night, and let me show you. I gotta show you what I bet. I bet I have some of the stuff highlighted that you're probably going to talk about. Okay, let's just go. Let's just start on the page. I want to see if I did highlight some of the things that you're probably going to hit, because
I think let's look at page. I'm trying to think. I couldn't remember exactly where we left off, but I thought it was in section 4.
88, 89, I think is where we left off last time.
Is that where we left off? Okay.
Yes. And actually, I think it was probably 86. But, okay, don't tell me halfway down the page of 92. That's not actually probably something you have highlighted, but it's a question that I had around.
Okay.
But definitely page 93, right where he says, among the months. Okay. I knew it. I knew you're going to hit that one. And then down the second paragraph there, right when he says, we have seen that evil. Actually, that whole piece.
Exactly. Yeah. That whole section. Yeah. That's okay. That's the section.
Yeah. I'm learning. All right.
That's exactly what you start to see. Like, because this is how C.S. Lewis works, is he builds this argument, he pulls the pieces,
he's complicated.
Here's a piece, and what you don't realize is that they're all bricks.
Yes.
And he kind of builds this foundation, and then he steps up on it, and you get
a view.
The view, exactly.
Yeah, you get a view. Yeah, he steps up on there and reveals to you but part of I don't know that the modern mind can even read C.S. Lewis, let alone the stuff that he's trying to get us to. I think he's a way back, but it takes some work, man, because it took me a minute. Like, as I was reading him, I'm like, man, what are you? Granted, there is a part of it that because I haven't read The Fairy Queen, that I'm ignorant to a lot of the things that he's talking about, right? So I'm not caught up on the whole narrative. But even so, the way he's breaking it down and explaining, I'm like, there's no way I can read The Fairy Queen.
Right. And that's what, and that's why we got started with this book at all, is that the ability to imaginatively enter into a work like The Fairy Queen is beyond the imagination. And so it's like, it's Saint Louis, who's sort of the St. Patrick of France, or of the Gauls. He used to go in and to the Gauls when they were pagans into their towns, and he would find a barrel of pickles, for example, like a full barrel, 50-gallon barrel of pickles, and he would lift it up over his head.
Yeah.
And pretty soon people would come to see the strong man, and he'd be lifting things, and once he had a crowd gathered, he'd step up on the barrel of pickles and say, now that I've got you here, let me tell you about Jesus. Right? He knew that he just was the strongest person anybody had ever seen, and so he was using that to his advantage as an evangelist.
That kind of reminds me of these guys who go out there and like, let me break and rip phone books. And
yeah, no, totally. He was like the early church power team. Yeah.
I don't
But
know if I like that, Jason.
well, no, I I'm just telling you what happened.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
'Cause I'm
not
not
judging one way or
approving
the
it.
other.
I'm just
I'm not judging one way or the other.
it's just
But
what happened.
there's nothing new under the sun, right? There's
Right.
there's
Right.
evangelists that would have like dirt with blood mixed in it from the Holy Land that they would say was, somebody gathered up dirt underneath the cross, and they would open the dirt and walk around the city with it before they started preaching, and then when they preach, it was effective, and so they said, "Man, that's some powerful dirt." So then that
Completely missed out on it. Yeah.
completely, yeah, but that's just the seeker sensitive movement. But our dirt is sociology. It's the
Oh.
we've all got the same we've all got the same temptations to magic. But the point with St. Louis was that he didn't start with the huge, the biggest, strongest thing to lift. He started with something else, right? Well, he started with small things and worked his way up. That's how you get strong. If you spend all day trying to
Mm.
lift the thing that you can't, you're never going to lift it. But if you lift things that you can heavier and heavier and heavier, then eventually you can lift the thing you can't. And in a lot of ways, imaginatively being able to enter into other people's the previous generations worldviews, I guess you'd say, or generations of Christians that were much stronger than us. We have to build our imagination up to it, and that starts with the weights. And in a lot of ways, this is like imaginative weightlifting, where it's like, okay, we're just working on this one muscle right now, right? We never in real life just work on a single muscle, but if you're trying to get strong, generally, you have to work on this muscle is weak, and so it can't keep up. So that's what C.S. Lewis does. Is he says, let's just work this one imaginative muscle. Let's just work on the images of good and evil. And he even says, we're not talking about motivations to good and evil. That's a whole different thing, right? We're not talking about, he's just what does evil look like in the world? When a person has embraced it, what does that do to them? Not even what caused them to embrace it yet. Right, that's a whole nother topic. And that's what because of the psychological movement, the movement to psychologize everything, the church embraced, the first time we embraced it was the liberalism movement, the modernist movement, and now we're re-embracing it under the counseling movement in a lot of sections. Because of that, though, we're really concerned about our motivations and what motivates somebody to evil, and that there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. And Shakespeare has a lot about that. Dostoevsky writes about that a lot. Like, they're great Christian writers that spent their energy there, but they all had it already settled in their mind what the image of good was that they were aiming at. We don't even have that settled, and so when we end up with an image of good that is psychological, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, explain that.
Well, so I was just listening to a really good interview yesterday with and one of the old SNL writers and cast members who has a drug problem, right? And has, since he was a teenager, and he spent about a decade snorting Adderall, and so he was talking about it. And then he said, but now he's been sober a couple of years, and he talked about how he got sober, and it was all about learning to identify psychological states and then explain what they really were in a way that kept him in control of himself rather than losing control of himself. And which is none of it was, there was nothing he said that was bad or that couldn't be used well by a Christian, right? He talked about how if you let anger take over, that the root of anger is selfishness, right? That somehow somebody's offense against you is such that you have to get them back,
or
right?
pride.
So that's a pridefulness that says I'm this important, right? And he's sitting there saying that, and I'm like, yeah, that's true, right? That's a psychological foundation to anger. When you can stop and learn to recognize that, all of that is good and true, and it's not salvation yet, right?
Right.
But it might be the sort of thing that gets enough defenses down or enough opening that they can actually hear the gospel rather than just respond in anger or something. Like, God could use something like that, because it's in and of itself, it's a good thing, even if it's not a saving thing, which is another distinction that the medievals had that we don't have, right? But that's we'll get to that too.
Oof.
But all of the descriptions that this guy gave of getting things right were descriptions about the negative, the negative aspects of psychology, the loss of control, and the regaining of control of psychology. Every single one of them that he described, you could do sitting in a dark room with the lights off without leaving a chair. Right. Because psychology and salvation in a psychological universe is all in your head. That image of good, that is informed the image of good, which is it's all an internal states question, right? With that image of good that is being sought by these psychological means is all an internal state type of question, right? Whereas, so the image of good that Spencer puts forward is an incredibly active bodily experience, right? What does it look like when all things are right in the world? It says you're hunting dragons, you're singing, you're dancing, your family's out in the forest hunting together. You've got these descriptions and images of good are society wide. You can't have the good that you can't have the ultimate good that Christ is hunting for yourself without the conversion of all of your neighbors, right? It's a completely different view of the effects that the God wants the gospel to have on us, because it's such an outward blessing move, right? The holiness doesn't stay put. The holiness doesn't. If holiness works into you, it's because it's going to work out of you and affect your whole society. That is just assumed. That's the base level of good. Is that what's good look like? Your whole village dancing at your whole village in a parade together. Your whole village doing something together, joyfully, actively. Right? This is what I mean, that we literally don't have a category anymore for some of the things that were assumed by the late medievals when it came to just what does it mean when I say things are right in the world.
Is he doing the same thing with evil too? So
he is, yeah. Because evil forces everybody apart, right? Evil forces everybody to themselves. Evil forces everybody into their own room, into their own yard, into their own spot where they're alone and not moving, not dancing, not singing.
Wait, so
not
evil
together.
Social media?
I think the picture of like driving, if you in one of the scripts that I was just writing, I tried to find a way to just give an external picture of a broken society. And so what I did was have the lights go out and everybody was on, or have the electricity in the building went out, but everybody was on their phone. And so all of a sudden, all you could see was the faces of everybody, and they were all facing different directions. But with the lights on, it looked like they were together. As soon as the lights went off, you could tell that they weren't together, even though they were in the same space. And I think that's what is happening to us. I mean, think of what social media has done to dancing as an example, right? Dancing is something that you line up, all face the same direction towards the camera to do, right? You don't face each other to dance anymore, right? Dancing used to be
Together
something.
separately.
Yeah, exactly. You're all dancing together separately. That's a really good way to put it. Whereas the point of dancing is to be together. Yeah.
Like COVID was like together, apart.
Right. Well, I think it was interesting. I was rewatching some old. It's not that old, but the Fraggle Rock stuff that came out during COVID when they were trying to help kids. And I think this was what Fraggle Rock was doing is not a problem. It was what the government was doing that forced Fraggle Rock to have to do this, where it was trying to show kids how to be together on Zoom.
Yeah.
And it was actually, it's very sweet. I love Fraggle Rock. I think that's one of the best things the Jim Henson company did. And it's one of the things they didn't sell to Disney. And so it's still consistently putting out good stuff. The new Apple Plus on Fraggle Rock, I really like. But the creators of the Jim Henson company said, we got to help kids understand how to be together on Zoom. And so it did a whole short series of Muppets, like learning to use Zoom together. And it's like very sweet. And it shows them singing on Zoom together, right? That's like, we can still be together to do the important things like singing and which is exactly right, except it doesn't work. And I don't think we knew that yet because Zoom was such a new, it was like such a new thing that we didn't realize like there's a lot that you actually can't do that way.
Yeah. I saw choirs trying to sing and stuff like that together as well. So then is he filling out so there is an internal reality to evil and to good. That's true. But he's not filling that part out. He seems to think that we've kind of understand or at least have that. There is a fuller side of the internal realities that manifest themselves externally that we seem to have lost.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So he goes through sort of, if I remember right, he goes through the 12 virtues of Aristotle and characterizes them, right? So each of the books is devoted to one of the virtues, but everybody knows, like, for example, you shouldn't hate your neighbor. He's trying, and so, but it's not enough to say you shouldn't hate your neighbor. What does it look like to have an imagination that resists hating your neighbor, right? That an imagination that can see down the road to what do I become if I continue hating my neighbor, right?
Yeah, that's right. He was, I think, a little bit in this chapter, he talks about this as it relates to Shakespeare, how Shakespeare was not telling you what it's like to kill. Who was it? He was kill the king, but what it was like to become Macbeth.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah.
There's a difference.
There's a difference between, hey, check your motivations. You shouldn't be wanting to destroy you shouldn't want to just steal your brother's kingdom, right? Hamlet, for example. But there's a difference between that and, hey, you know where Macbeth ends up, right? You know, if you imitate Macbeth, how that story ends. And his assumption is that's why we don't we're motivated by telling ourselves a different ending to where the road goes. Like we get on this road that actually goes off of a cliff down to hell at the end of it, but we tell ourselves this road is going some other place. And so he's trying to say, no, this road goes that way. that road goes this way, right? So you want this road because look at how the end of this road is the fulfillment of who you were created to be, right? So that's why we
Mm.
love one another, why we have peace, patience, kindness, right? Those things lead to a different sort of society. And so imagine the society that you want, and then let me help you understand which roads get us to that society. And then the society that you don't want, which is an anti-society, a non-society, these roads lead there, right? So he's trying to form our imagination towards the good, right? So that we love the virtues that lead to the good.
And it's funny. This is exactly what Australia did with Bluey, though, right? They started seeing the kind of imagination and say, okay, parents who are thinking this way create a society that functions this particular way. Families who think this other way, we get a flourishing, beautiful society. So let's create the kind of content that produces flourishing. Now, it's still a little Marxist, but
Well, it's only Marxist though because a bureaucratic government is doing it,
right. I'm gonna say if it
right?
was a different,
Yeah.
yeah,
So if we were in a monarchy and the king paid an artist to do something to help his population understand the good, then we would say, well, that's good, right? The king paying for art to be made isn't a bad thing. The problem is we don't in a non-monarchy in a bureaucratic society. You're right. The assumptions are all messed up.
do you think that I particularly remember this during the time, well, critical race theory is still kind of blowing up. It's falling down now. I think the worldview is starting to collapse. Although I'm always
It's only because it already won.
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So you're starting to see its leaders collapse, like Ibram X. Kendi, Black Lives Matter. You're starting to see the Telegram, or is it the Telegraph? Everybody's asking, did we get duped in 2020 with George Floyd now? Right? Everybody's starting to ask that question. But everybody already buys into the presuppositions that created that for them to fall into. That hasn't changed at all. They just found out that they got duped with this one, but they still believe that cosmology, right?
Right.
And so, but do you think that most? So I was bringing that up to say that most um, Christians still spend, at least as the apologetic world, uh, our psychology, our not theology, but our academic world, spend a lot of time in the internal observations of evil rather than the external realities of evil and good. So, I remember, and I think Carl Truman's book was absolutely wonderful, but it seemed like it dealt way more psychologically with um the worldview of critical theory, the worldview of kind of the new mind, but it didn't reform at least I don't remember it reforming a cosmology. You know what I mean?
No, yeah. He points out the problems, but I
Yes.
think he falls into the same thing we all do, which is it's sort of a reactionary.
Right.
We live in it because we don't have a solid shared social in within the church vision for the good life.
Mm,
We don't have anything to argue for, and so we always argue against. Right? We actually
mhm.
don't really have anything to argue for. It's really kind of sad as a church. You might get one thing here, another thing there. I think that this is why you have a growing um the folks calling themselves the patriarchal movement. um they're trying to argue for a good, right? And I think that's why it is catching on. I um and I think that's actually the strategy, right? Is you have to say the good we're arguing for is more beautiful.
I
And
think,
people are,
yeah.
yeah, and people are arguing that the patriarchal movement isn't that they're trying to argue that it's a return to something that they're not arguing for.
Right. Same
Um,
thing with Christian nationalism, I think, too. At least the most among the most. I've been reading so much stuff around this, and I think amongst the most well-known leaders of the group, um, you know, they are arguing for the same thing. I think some sort of um, rediscovery of what good is as a nation, right?
right.
Um, and trying to fight that battle. Here's what good looks like in a nation.
Yeah. I think the difficulty is we've got to drop the Machiavellianism, but
I,
it's so embedded.
yeah, I don't, that's well. This is why I don't think we can leave. As much as I'm not a Christian nationalist, I don't. This is why I don't think we can leave this particular movement. I think we have to be a part of it because somebody's gonna have to fight with them about what's Machiavellianism, right? Because I think that they could embrace that because it's kind of just yeah. I mean, when you go back and look at uh some of the the old school reform, I think you can see some of that in there. Like you can see like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's the same thing they're doing. I mean, y'all got some good ideas and I appreciate your position, but that's not how we that's not how we do it, right? That's not the
Yeah.
way in which we
Yeah.
implement our worldview. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
you have Machiavelli who's informing some of the what do they call them, magisterial reform guys, I think, unintentionally. So
Yeah. And I mean, one of the elders in Calvin's church, who was a lawyer, wrote a book against Machiavelli
oh, you
in
told me about that. What was that called?
Calvin's. It's called Against Machiavelli, I'm pretty sure, and it was a series of lectures that he did saying like, this is the real danger. Machiavelli's the real danger that we have to remember to resist. And
I gotta find that one.
So it's this is not a new problem, right?
Right.
The promise of Machiavelli is he's one of the guys that came along and said, hey, I can get you there. What is it that you want? I can get you there, right? So it was because he just said the kind of world that we live in, no matter where we go, we get there by force. And so I can help you get wherever it is you want to go. And that's the most dangerous kind of salesman, right? Is the one who comes in saying, here's I can identify what you want and promise to you what you want by my means. And that kind of salesman is the one who always gets you.
How, you remember the pastor's name?
No, something fun. I've got it. I've got it written down. Let me see if I can find it.
Paul. Oh, no. I have to. Yeah, against the grain. That's not it. First, I have to make sure I spell Machiavelli right. But yeah. Not another book I need to add to my library, but I'm going to do it anyway. Against the Throne and Altar, Machiavelli and the Political Theory under the English. That's Paul A. Wright. That's not it.
No. Well, Innocent. Was it Innocent? I think it was Innocent Gentilet.
Spell that for me.
INNOCENT. GENTILLET.
Oh, okay. That's not.
It'd be French though, so Gentile.
I just got a man with his chest open and a shirt on. Okay, that ain't it. You know what? I just thought about that. That's probably not something I should go Google and search. Yeah. Let's come back to that one. All right. Can we spend so yeah. Let's not let Google figure out if I meant something else. Uh can, can can we talk about then? Yeah, I know. Yeah, don't write the joke, Jason. Don't write the joke.
Okay.
The joke's already there. It's already there. Don't write any further. So can we spend, because in this chapter, by the way, if nobody has this book, you need to get this book. We've been going through it. We're going to finish it. And it's probably one of the most helpful books to help restore your cosmology and to get ready to read, which we're going to do next, which is get ready to read Edmund Spencer's Fairy Queen. But it's called C.S. Lewis, Spencer's Images of Life. So get the book if you're wondering what we're talking about. We are at page 88. We made it through 88, 89. So here's what I want to do now. I want to spend as much time as we can working through Images of Good and how Spencer does it and how C.S. Lewis is breaking down what Spencer is doing, so that we can grasp this. Because again, like I was saying, I was lost for like a page or two, and I've understood though with Lewis, you just keep reading, reading. It'll pay off. Just keep reading, and don't worry about it. And then you'll come back and you'll read that part again with whole new light.
Right.
But this is a part of your mind and your brain that you haven't worked before. So you're gonna have to work through this. And it's poetic. It's one of those deep things. There's a lot of poetry in here that he's quoting. And you're like, oh, that sounds really good. I just wish I knew what it means. And then he gets to it. Right. And so,
right. But there's an older way of arguing that we don't really use anymore, where they put the footnotes at the beginning of the book.
Okay.
Right. And that's because because they knew
do the work, huh?
Yeah. You can't just come in and say, here's my conclusion. People will say, well, you didn't prove it yet. Right. So start at the beginning and walk me to your conclusion. And that was the expectation in academia, is that you actually walked people to the conclusion. You didn't just state things. And so he's right at that transition. So his earlier books, the first couple of chapters will be footnotes, and his later books, everything's been shifted. Right. So he lived through the transition. And so it's so he still builds an argument that way. So here's a fact. Here's a fact. Here's a fact. Now let me reason through those premises to a conclusion. It's uncomfortable.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
But that forms people that can think clearly. Right. So.
Well, yeah. No, so I guess did you just change coffee mugs?
Oh, I made 2 cups of coffee this morning right before, because I hadn't had any. So I finished one. Now I'm on to my second cup of coffee.
Huh. We're going to talk about that later. Is that an image of good, Jason? We'll figure it out in a second. So then.
It is after this weekend. It was a long weekend.
So then. It seems like Lewis switched a little bit himself in how he presented his arguments, because he
ended up a popularizer, I think is what you would put it. So he started out as an academic, but realized that to popularize some of the things that he was learning, he had to come up with other ways of communicating besides the traditional academic way. This is one of his academic works, but this is why he switched as he got older. He switched to writing fairy tales, because in children's literature and fiction, because he said, I need to do the things that I've been studying. Right. As I get older, I need to baptize the imaginations of people rather than talking about people that baptized imaginations.
So can you baptize our imagination in the image of good here? Because he kind of does, honestly, he kind of does that. I mean, it is an academic work, but he starts to right around page 92 or 93, he starts like just laying it on thick.
Yeah, the
And
music, you could hear the music rise in the
yeah,
backgrounds.
you
Yeah.
sure could. But before, I want to ask a question on page 92. As I was reading, kind of struggling, he says spontaneity cannot be explicitly named like order, yet it defines itself in the response of all that is subject to nature.
Yeah. So
Translate.
so he's talking about how that when the embrace of the good brings a simplicity of within a person, right? It where so what when you've raised boys, right? You spend a lot
Mm,
of time trying to grow the distance between having a thought and acting on it, right? Like
right.
that the distance between brain and fingers is really short when boys are little. They're like, I as I have the thought, I do the thing before I decide if this is a good idea or not, right?
Right.
And there's a you want to learn for them to say, hey, I think I should do this. Is that a good idea? Yes, it is. I will. Or I think I should do this. Is that a good idea? No, it's not. I won't. And so you try to grow that distance between thought and action, so that your boys grow up and become men that are wise. So and that there's something really important about that. But there's also um, you want to grow the love of the good, that shrinks the distance between knowing what's right and acting on what's right, and that so Paul calls that an undivided mind, right? So that you love what's right, and so you immediately act on it as soon as you know what's right.
Mm,
So he calls that an undivided mind. He also calls it simplicity. He also calls it wholeheartedness. Right, those are the words that Paul uses for that. A lack of distance between knowing what's right and doing what's right. So as soon as you know what's right, then you act on it. Right. So this
that's a
is
discipline though too, right? Like that.
it is right. So it's a discipline that grows, but he said it's also what it looks like is spontaneity, right? In real life, it's the spontaneity. It's a where you act so quickly, you
Mm,
act spontaneously, you act immediately, right? There's not a distance
I
between
got you. It's like an
knowing what's right
athlete.
and doing. Yeah, exactly. So it's like muscle memory for the soul, right?
I've always I've always called that stuff in theater and acting and directing. I've always called it planned spontaneity, right? Like
Right.
you've done it
Yeah.
so many times that, and you know it's going to happen. So when it does, you know exactly what to do.
Right. That's exactly it. And so when he talks about um
Mm,
the like when you see somebody that is completely into a dance, right? And they know the steps so much that they're not thinking about the steps at all, right?
like jazz too.
Yeah, like jazz, or tap. You would see the old tap dance guys. They could do things that
Yeah,
were crazy, they made it look so smooth. Um, that uh, that um, full heartedness in what you do, or wholeheartedness, simplicity of desires. There's nothing else I want to do besides this thing right now. So that's what he's talking about. Whereas order, he said order you can set out and describe and then act on. Right, spontaneity isn't that sort of thing. Spontaneity is a discipline of um it's a kind of a discipline of the imagination, or it's the work that goes into spontaneity is something that happens all a long time before there's anything there. So it's the sort of thing where it's the um the guy that jumps out and grabs the kid in front of the car, and you say, man, you what were you thinking at the time? He says, I wasn't thinking. I saw a kid that was in danger
it
and
just did it.
jumped, right?
Yeah.
And just did it, right? That's what he's talking about, is having that that's the goal, is that we spontaneously are jumping towards the good, because of the discipline and the work and the order that, and everything that went before that. When the time comes, we can jump wholeheartedly into the moment of good. So that undividedness is something that moderns have not experienced, right? We live in the balcony of our own lives, and we watch ourselves live because there's a dividedness. There's two of us inside, or many or more, right, where our mind and our this was Walker Percy's entire life project, was to diagnose and treat the dividedness of the psyche of man, of modern man, right? He said that that a culture that loves the Lord and walks away from him, it cracks or shatters the psyche of the individuals within it.
Oh, write that down.
So this is why, like, there's no going back once you start reading a little bit of Walker Percy, because once he points it out, I mean, you can't be put back into the matrix. Once you start, this is in my apologetics class that's coming up. The book.
Hey, when is that? Is that popped up yet? Has it populated, or how can people just send you an email right now and say, hey, I want to be a part of the class. Let me know when it's ready so you can. How do you want to do that? Because I have so many people hitting me up like, hey, I'm ready to take this class.
They can't. Well,
or should we just wait until the site is like a fully functional?
I don't know if the site. If it's not function, I thought it would be functional by now, but let me look. Is it there yet?
Can you sign up?
It's not quite there yet, but we're working on the back end of it right now to get it functioning. So it's almost there. It'll be there any moment. And then we can send it out to everybody. But we're using Thomas Howard's book, Christ the Tiger, as one of our books. And it's about this, young modern whose selfhood is shattered by looking in on itself. Right. And that's what most modernist poetry, that age, that World War I to 1950 poetry, that modernist poetry, is all about the discovery, the experience of the shattered selfhood. There's some really great poets during that time describing it really, really well, but they're describing a bad thing. That's the difficulty. Right, so, and often they don't have an answer to it. Well, that's what T.S. Eliot found the answer to it, and it was Christ the Tiger, right? And it's a Lord that is owed and has earned and demands total allegiance. That's the only answer to the shattered selfhood of modernity. Right. So that and that's what the church won't give. The church won't preach a Lord who is owed and has earned and demands total allegiance.
How do you mean by that? What do you mean? Yeah.
So Jesus is he is owed complete allegiance because of who he is in his nature. He is God, right? It's not just an economic difference. The way somebody who's been voted in as mayor, we honor them because they are in an office that we have helped populate, right? We didn't help populate the office of God, right? Jesus is fully, completely God. He is also fully and completely man who has died for the human race um, who has died for the sins of Adam, and was raised from the dead by the power of the Holy Spirit to prove his kingship. It's in the beginning of Romans, right? The resurrection by the power of the Holy Spirit is all the evidence that we need that not only is he owed it in his person, in his selfhood as God, he has earned it as the rightful heir of Adam, the rightful heir of Noah, the rightful heir of Abraham, the rightful heir of David, the rightful heir of the empires of the earth, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. He has it in his personhood. He's earned it in his personhood. He has it in his personhood as God. He's earned it in his personhood as man. And he demands it from the right hand of God, right? He expects the total allegiance. That is healing news to the selfhood of modern man, which is so divided, right? That we're never going to rationalize our way to a healed selfhood, but we can obey our way there, right? We can submit our way there. We can honor our way there. We can give glory to a restored selfhood because of the beauty of Jesus, right? Because of the goodness of Jesus, because he is the way, the truth, the life, right? So the only way out of the shattered selfhood is to submit ourselves fully and completely to Jesus, right? Because that's how we come to ourselves as well, right? So this is that's how Luke puts it when the younger brother he's off feeding the pigs, and it says he comes to himself and realizes, what have I done? why am I out here feeding the pigs? Right? It says he comes to himself. Right? We need that, but the only way for our selfhood to come back to our selfhood, right, for the restoration of the divided selfhood within us, to the only way is the full, complete allegiance to Jesus, and that's going to restore us. But the church won't preach it, right? The church is trying to do something. It's almost anything else the church is willing to do, except for just declare that the love of Jesus demands your allegiance.
Well,
God loves you. Give him full allegiance. You can trust him with your full allegiance. We don't give full allegiance to anything, right? We are ironic, right? Within ourselves, there are multiple perspectives. We are a walking irony in our experience existentially, if that makes sense.
And you can keep going. I'm trying to work through
it. Right. Because we're always both looking out and looking at ourselves. Right. Mm-hmm. So we're spiritually cross-eyed. We have and what has, in the ancient world, the picture that they gave of the problem, of the thing that empire did to the psyche of man was a giant with a single eye, right? So that's what empire produces within within the psychological experience of the individuals, right? So a giant with one eye is what Odysseus, he gets trapped on the island with this giant that just has a single eye, and he lives in a cave by himself, and he has no society, he has no community, and so he has no depth perception, right? So he has no and that image was taken and was used over and over for having no spiritual depth perception, no philosophical depth perception, right? And that because there's no community, you don't have other you need other people, you need society, you need community to have spiritual depth perception.
Yeah, I was Peter Lightheart was talking about the creation of Eve, and that's one of the things that was important, was that in order for Adam to image God properly, he had to have an us, right?
Yeah,
And Eve created us because he was able to see himself through her. And so, like babies, they don't know, you show them their arm and they're like, what is that?
yeah,
There's no concept of what anything is apart from somebody else revealing that to you in some way. So community helps you even see you in
right,
one
exactly.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't see when we literally can't see ourselves, right? We can't see our face without somebody looking at it, and we don't even know who we are unless we see ourselves in the eyes of somebody else. That's how we were created that way. This is why when a marriage goes wrong, it's so messed up. People get
Self-destructive.
Self-destructive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is because you're looking at yourself in a clown mirror, right? So that this person is looking back at you with hatred, but it's the mirror that you were designed to learn to see yourself in. And so when that goes wrong, that it goes so wrong. Well, but we're on the other side of having come together in Christian community with the rivalry going away, everything, and then it coming back without the gods, right? So even the mirror of the heavens that the ancients had to look into, to look back down and see themselves, that is gone, right? So we spend all of our time trying to look at ourselves directly, right? And it makes us spiritually cross-eyed, right? So it's the opposite problem that the tribes and the empire had when they looked at one another. We have the opposite problem, spiritual cross-eyedness, which means that we need somebody to really come in and take us by the hand and walk us across the bridge, right? Because we're going to fall off every time. But the church, so I think that's why when a church preaches strong, it grows, right? When a church preaches the lordship of Christ, it grows, right? Because the lordship of Christ is the offer of a hand to walk across the bridge is good news to a blind person, to a cross-eyed person, to somebody that can't see.
Hey, Jason, how is it that, man, there's a couple things I was thinking about here, but how is it that churches will preach half of that and not the total of that? So they will preach a form of the lordship of Christ as it relates to your own personal sanctification, but somehow, you know how you said earlier that holiness doesn't stay put?
Yeah.
Well, if your home and those things in your immediate family are things that are being sanctified, how is it that they don't teach that actually works its way out into society too? Or they're afraid of it,
Yeah. What's nice is we just saw with MacArthur that it doesn't matter if they preach it or not, it works, right?
Yeah.
Like
it takes judgment in order for it to kick in.
True.
Right.
But I think it's because of that image of the good that we have that is individual. That's individual, right? That the good is something. This is the Gnosticism. The good is something that happens inside our head, inside our heart, inside of us. It's not something that is that requires society, or it doesn't require society for me to be joyful before the Lord. But my joy before the Lord is incomplete until the whole society is converted, right? So, and I think this is it's a different view that says, well, I want everybody in town a part of the choir. Everybody in town. I want everybody in town as a dance partner.
Right.
I don't, that because of the Machiavellianism, we think that the conversion of everybody is a power game. but it's not, right? The conversion of society is that they're missing out on the dance, right? There's holes in the picnic. There's tables that still haven't been filled, right? It's a different view. Like
You're so right.
Because what laws we end up with or don't end up with is tertiary at best, right? It's because the real question is people, the healing that people receive in submission to Christ is it'll lead to different laws, and that'll be great, right? I look forward to those different laws, but I see this a lot with the way that we our rhetoric surrounding being what it means to be pro-life, that right when we're not, like, being pro-baby, right, is something that everybody should be able to get on board with, right? But what we argue for, we spend our time arguing about just about anything else, right? But what's the best argument for pro-life? Holding up all of the babies and then telling their stories. This baby wasn't going to make it, right? This baby was going to be aborted. Can you imagine that? The world is better with this baby in it, right? Right. And that is a that is an argument from the beauty of the beauty of children, the beauty of the image of God, the beauty of life, that we need to be making everywhere. I mean, the number of times that I've gone to a pro-life event or pro-life anything, and you get up and you start talking like lawyers, right? Rather than getting together and celebrating the lives of the children that have been saved by the ministry. You just think, I mean, we're missing out on the motivation. I mean, the reason I'm here is so that people will get saved, right? And I want righteous laws. I want good laws that protect and save people, and that's really good. But it's because I want the people to get saved, not because the laws in and of themselves getting saved is a good thing, right? The purpose of the law is to protect life, right? And we don't actually have that vision for the beauty of life that would make it unthinkable to kill a child.
This funny, I remember, and this is going back when you were talking about just a moment ago, as far as conversion, we think that it's a power move. When I try something or I taste something that is actually good and amazing and I love it, I feel bad if somebody else misses out on this experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. To the point that I chase these folks down and say, you have to go eat here. You have to try this. Ooh, this is amazing. You're going to love it, because I'm seeking the good for that person. And so I spend my time then making sure that they have this experience. If they come to Moscow, these are the places you got to have this. This is going to be amazing for you, right? And I believe, and I know that in the tasting of this, something will transform for them. And because I know that it's so good that they can't, they're not designed to resist this type of goodness, right? Matter of fact, they're designed to embrace this type of goodness. And so I wonder sometimes, this is, our best arguments are always beauty. But if we haven't really come to understand or been practicing that spontaneous reaction of good, right? Then we ourselves are not presenting the thing. Like you said, we're creating the order. We're ordering it out, right? The order. It's not that we don't have it. We're just creating the order and the list and this. And instead of like, there's a spontaneous reaction to good, right? There's a spontaneous reaction to joy that is, and it's just you just do it, right? And it's just, it becomes just a part of your lifestyle, and it's that argument that that we don't know how to practice anymore because of, in one sense or another, that we are sharing so much of a cosmology of the secular idea, the secular world. So then we feel like, and you said this earlier, we feel like there is a psychological or philosophical convincing that we have to do, as if the problem is all there, when really the problem is not in them philosophizing their way to the cross, right? Or philosophizing their way there. It's actually in taste and see your way there, right? Believe your way there. That's the only way you get there. You have to believe this. And the way you believe is like, I've tasted. I used to hear old folks talk like this. Oh, honey, baby. Now, these people weren't the best apologists. They didn't know all this lovely theology that we know. They're like, baby, let me tell you something. I done tasted them, right? I know I done been at this table. It's good. And you ain't gonna ever convince me with no other argument. I don't care what they find and dig up in the earth. Ain't nobody ever gonna be able to convince me about nothing else but about the goodness of Jesus. And that's kind of, I don't even hear people talk like that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like that's just like gone.
And I think I think it's there's when people are like, oh, we need our church to grow, and they say, well, maybe we should expand I've heard people actually say things like this. Well, maybe we need to expand our parking lot. Maybe the parking's not good enough. Maybe maybe we need a paint job on the church, whatever. And your church might need a paint job. That's maybe your parking isn't good. But churches grow when people love being there and can't help but tell everybody, hey, you should come. It's great. You're going to like it, right? You should come to my church. You're going to like it. I love it, right? You don't, if you guilt people into inviting their friends, then you'll have to guilt people to get them to stay, right? I just think that there is there's a beauty and a glory to Jesus that we don't preach. And I think we don't actually believe that the foundation of this whole universe is the overflowing love of the triune God. Because we don't believe that, we're always trying to come up with something else besides preaching Jesus. Or besides telling people, introducing them to God, right? If we actually believed that this world, everything about it, was the product of the overflowing love of God, who is gracious and merciful, and we would just invite people to meet him,
right?
It's a cosmology issue. I mean, we have bought into that this world is a dark and empty and quiet place, quiet like a tomb, dead, and that the good news is, hey, I can get you out of here, right? I can get you out of here in your mind now, and eventually all the way out. But the work, when you realize that the world is a symphonic dance that's going on all around us all the time, and that all we've got to do is learn the steps to join in, it's a different evangelism is a different thing.
I was just listening to James Jordan. I'll say this until the cows come home. Everybody needs to go listen Against Gnosticism from James Jordan. I think that's what it's called. I think the Theopolis app has it available there. Let me make sure I got the title right. Against Gnosticism, Taking Time and History Seriously, from James Jordan. Gotta go listen to that. God. And one of the things he says, and he's talking about, and this is what you triggered it for me, what he says, we preach the gospel like we're trying to get people to come into the kingdom, right? We preach like, come into the kingdom, leave the world. Right? Like it's over. It's like we can. It's like this boat. It's like no. The kingdom has come to you, and now you can lay down your idols and your weapons and everything else, and because you don't need them anymore. Christ's kingdom is ruling and reigning, and now you get to live as subjects underneath his leadership, underneath his rule. Repent and believe the gospel. Lay down your idols, lay down your weapons, lay down all of the things and live, because this is how the world really is. Those idols don't work. Right. They don't work here anymore. Those gods are dead now. And that's one of the things that people, I think when we talk about the gospel, even people who are not dispensationalists, like we're getting out of here, this joint, because this thing is going to blow. And it's like, God is restoring this place, and the whole thing is now being ruled and reigned by him. So, hey, come and hear the good news. You have a good king. You have a good Lord. And this is why I think what you were saying earlier about, we don't preach that so much. We preach a form, even our gospel is a form of escapism. So it's like, no, but the reason why the gospel works is because Christ really is ruling and reigning. He has all authority in heaven and earth. And so we are commissioned by the one who has all authority to go proclaim his message of rule.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what's so confused. Like, that's really basic Christian stuff, though.
I remember NT Wright, so it was in a Q&A, somebody said, so, why he said something about, so they said, why is it that when you talk about the resurrection, you are always, trying to do this or that? And he said, actually, what you don't understand is when I stand up and preach about the resurrection, people are changed. He said, people don't walk away the same person they were when they walked in after they hear me preach about the resurrection. He said, and that's because Jesus was raised from the dead. Right. It was like very, very simple, where he's like, I've been doing this long enough to know you stand up, you say, hey, Jesus was raised from the dead, and a different person walks out of the room than walked into the room, right? That the message has a transformative power. And he's just said that is only explainable by the fact that Jesus was raised from the dead. There's nothing else that can explain the transformations I've seen in people's lives. And that's an argument we don't see. I love this section. And but that's an experiential argument that you only get if you're preaching the gospel. Right?
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
So this is on page 95 when C.S. Lewis sums it up. He says, in sum, then, evil is solemn, good is gay.
Got it highlighted. Highlighted.
Evil means starvation, good glows. Evil imprisons, good sets free. Evil is tired, good is full of vigor. The one says, let go, lie down, sleep, die. The other, all aboard, kill the dragon, marry the girl, blow the pipes, beat the drums, let the dance begin. This is you're like that. It took 92 pages of argument to be able to summarize that clearly. Right. Because he's arguing for something so different than what we assume. Right. That, and I just, that this is the gold that you think, I dug through 90 pages of silt to get this small chunk of gold, but it's so valuable that it was worth all the digging. Right. And, but it's an imagination conversion. It's the conversion of our imagination to the right view of the good life that gives the strength and the power and the hope. I mean, this is what it is when Paul says, when Paul talks about hope. Right? We don't give content. We talk about hope, but we never fill the word hope up with the content that like this.
Oh, you were done there. I was still expecting you were going to explain some more of the hope content. No,
Well,
this is
because
go ahead.
the next paragraph he says, what Spencer has done is to make an image of the whole of life,
Yeah,
a hymn to the universe that he and his contemporaries believed themselves to inhabit.
I have that underlined. It's so funny.
For the universe as they conceived it is a great dance or ceremony or society. Our virtue and happiness here now lie in participating in this ceremony as much as we can. Joy and revelry are at the core of it. This is the stuff that you walk away saying, "Oh, this is what I'm missing." When I go out to my job as a plumber, when I go out to my job as an electrician, as a teacher, as a pastor, whatever my job is, but if joy and revelry aren't at the core of it, right, then you're actually missing the point, right? We had a plumber come in recently and he had to pull our whole toilet apart, and I watched him do it, and then I was like, I can do it next time. So the next time we needed it, I tried to do it, and we ended up with leaks multiple times before I finally got there. And I was frustrated and complaining and swearing under my breath and all the things, and it's because I was missing the point, right? The joy and revelry of toilet installation, part of that is that it's going to leak when you don't know what you're doing, right? Part of that is the process of learning, and I know that in theory, but in the moment,
it's like, really, I just want the toilet to work.
Right? I ain't
got time for this joy.
Yeah. And so you read this, and the conviction comes to me in those places where it's like, why was I complaining so much? And of course I had to go back to Ace Hardware 3 times. Like that's part of the revelry of the fix. But it's really hard for me to remember in the moment, especially when I'm trying to do something with my hands because I'm so uncoordinated.
Well, that's part of the practice, right, that we were talking about earlier. So that spontaneous reaction is, ooh, God's gonna give me some joy, right? Like that's part of it. That's what we were talking about earlier.
An old friend named Arnie that drove this car that would break down. And I was like, Arnie, we got to fix your car. He's like, what? What's the adventure in that? His car would break down on the side of the road and be like, all right, Jesus, who you got for me?
Yeah, I ain't sanctified like that yet.
Not me neither. Arnie is who I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah, well, kind of. I want to have a car that works. I ain't gonna lie. I've been through that.
No, I know. I've been through that, and I still go through that, right? But it's the attitude that says,
"No, you're right.
What do you got for me here, Lord? You can have a car that works and still say, what have you got for me here?"
I've learned that when it comes to filmmaking. I've learned that from watching people, though. I watched Darren Doan. We'll plan something, hundreds of thousands of dollars. We'll go in something, and we'll plan it, and it'll fall apart right in the middle. And he keeps going like, this was the thing I was looking for. I was waiting for this particular event to happen so that I can get this shot, right? Like I wouldn't have used this set if this didn't all fall apart. So wow, what an amazing moment. We can't pay for this, and I watched him, and it was always in all the videos that we did, it was like this thing came together when it fell apart. Almost every time. It came together when it fell apart. And when it fell apart, he was a joyous guy, like, woo, look at what God gave us. And I'm like, yeah, awesome stuff. I'm glad somebody's planning this thing because I'm a producer. I'm freaking out,
right.
Like, hey, man, get the thing and do that. What's wrong with y'all? Hey, Darren, they said they can't do this. It's like, all right, well, cool. Well, we party out here. And it was amazing. It was like, that's where the party was where the breakdown was. And the guys would come who'd be working with, like, man, how did you plan this? Like, this was amazing. We would have never done it like this, So
it was like when we were filming the PKs and we lost the set on the roof last minute and had to film by the window, and the train came by as we were filming. You're like, what?
Yeah,
looks like we paid $100,000 to make a train.
Cue the train. Have the train come in. You just walk with it.
yeah, that turned out to be, I think, one of the best scenes that we shot, and it was because we lost the set that we
Yeah,
ended up
we
getting that shot.
lost the set, lost our lighting guys.
Yeah,
everything fell apart.
everything fell apart, and we ended up we had to go find light, and yeah, Andy found that the light coming through that window.
Right through that window. There's in this part that you read earlier, it says, for the universe as they conceived it is a great dance or ceremony or society. I don't want to skip past that part, because one of the things that I think we do, and I'm learning not to do, I'm trying to do this more, and you kind of really helped me with this, which is part of our cosmological understanding comes from general revelation. And when we look at the universe, like you said earlier, as being someplace that's like dead or quiet or not much going on, then we don't observe it in the way that we should see it. And then it doesn't inform us the way that it should, right? Because we think of it as something that shouldn't be observed and studied and thought through. And so if you think the universe is just there and it doesn't have this joyous society and this party that's going on, and it can't help but praise God in what it does, then you don't find yourself in the middle of that dance. You feel like you got to start the dance, you got to get the thing going, and it's like, no, you are already in a cosmic dance. Like, you're already involved in this, and everything around you in the universe is already participating societally in this. And so, like, it's almost like they're clapping and looking at you to say, jump on beat, let's go.
Right.
Like, that's what the universe is doing. And when you understand the universe like that, and you understand that God has already made things like that, it's easy because the beat is already pumping. It's already, the dance is happening, and you could just jump. It's like double dutch. Just get on in there. And it is going, it is doing something. That's why it wouldn't be hard to have the rocks cry out. They already doing what they're supposed to do. Right.
Right.
Yeah. But we don't think of that. We don't even give much time. Since I moved out to Genesee, there's no city lights really out there. So I get to look up and I get to see the stars. I get to see, planets, and it's just amazing to look at. And then to realize, these are all happening is the way that God has designed them from the beginning. Right. And it's like, wow, let me hit my note. The symphony is taking place, and you can see the symphony, a visible symphony happening, a visible symphony right in front of you. And so it encourages you to join in. But that's once you understand the reality of the universe, the reality, the basics of it. What God, we forget, this is why I guess when we were talking about planets and being beings and operating that way, and C.S. Lewis talks about that in his book, like, it's like, whoa, what we hold to that, well, yeah, because it tells you how the world is made. It tells you how the universe functions, right, and what's going on. And so then it becomes more of a less random and far more ordered.
Yeah. And the order is there. It's our it seems random only because we're not paying attention, right? Because our attention is on the spontaneity right in front of us, and when you step back and see the spontaneity of creation in the broader context, then you can see how well ordered the whole thing is. And I think that it's some of it is, I think, a Fifth Commandment issue, right? Because the order is long form order, multi-generational order. So, like, for example, I remember Halley's Comet coming. I was in fifth grade, sixth grade. I remember going out and seeing it with in the back field of our elementary school, and big group of people going out and seeing Halley's Comet and waiting for it to come by and having a telescope set up, and so we go out and we see it, right? Well, and then it comes back a generation later. But the reason that we know about the long form Halley's, because Halley's Comet doesn't come every year, is because of the communication from generation to generation. It came here, it came here, it came here. Here's the pattern, right? We don't have, when you lose when the previous generation loses your ear, the long form patterns all disappear, right? And some of it is previous generations that refused to keep talking, and some of it was previous generations that refused to keep listening. So it's not as if it's only was ever the younger generation's fault, because there was also generations that didn't keep it.
But still Fifth Commandment stuff, right?
But it's all Fifth Commandment stuff, right?
Explain how that's a Fifth Commandment thing, because people will hear that and think, oh, what do you mean it's honor your father and mother, right? That's
right. Yeah. So the Fifth Commandment, the way that both the prophets and the New Testament and the theologians throughout church history have treated the Fifth Commandment, is that embedded in it is the honor of the authorities, both above you and before you, right? So parents have an authority covenantally because they're above you, but then they also have an authority, a wisdom authority, because they're before you, right? So the honoring of your father and your mother is to receive both the wisdom from covenantally above, the wisdom that comes with submission, and then the wisdom that comes from before, that comes from listening, right? That you honor by hearing, and hearing the stories and knowing the stories and having it passed down. But that embedded within that is the wisdom. So you've got the command to honor father and mother, but it teaches us the wisdom that honoring authorities, rightful authorities, makes us wise, and honoring those that have come before makes us wise. So honoring up and honoring back in time, that there's embedded within that command the wisdom to be learned that comes from. So we can, you can technically listen to what your parents said because they are an authority, and do what they said because they have the power at the moment, but that's still not obeying the Fifth Commandment if you're not also honoring the wisdom that they have that came because they came before, right? So the Fifth Commandment is you've got the strict obedience of it, but then the wisdom that it also teaches. So you can disobey, or you can ignore the Fifth Commandment by refusing to learn the wisdom of it as well. So
also inherent in there that your parents are representative of generations before them in so many ways, so that when they are speaking, you're basically in one sense or another hearing Moses, Abraham, Isaac, right? That's the line. That's why
you're listening to the whole line of people that have come before. So
that's right.
And this, it can get complex if you've got, rivalries, say, between your parents and your grandparents. If they didn't get along or whatever, it makes it hard to figure out. But that's just the wrestling that makes us stronger and wiser as we work through all that. But your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents, if the world is working properly, then they're each passing down what they've learned to the next generation, and the wisdom of the generations grows. And so because you could also not, it would also be a ignoring of the Fifth Commandment to not tell your parent what you've learned from your parents and your grandparents to your own children, right?
Right.
In Proverbs 31, the Proverbs 31 woman says to calls her son the son of my womb, child of my womb, son of my womb, and so my wife will call her boys that. All right, whenever she's got wisdom to pass on. All right, come over here, son of my
Son of my womb. Yeah.
I got something to teach you, right? That just the fact that you came out of me gives me the authority to right now tell you how the world works, right?
Right. Right.
You know, so and that's an important thing. I mean, that's the authority of a mom is hugely important in the lives of children, especially sons. That voice should be, you know, a you know, the one of the biggest voices in their lives. Like this is the wisdom of the ages, the coming down to me. So the refusal to take up that authority as a fifth commandment, I think, is as much a fifth commandment issue that we run into in our day.
All right. Was there anything else you wanted to get through on this? This is so good. I know we skipped 93 where he talks about the among the months. The emphasis is more striking.
Oh yeah.
We didn't talk about that, but that might be something for. I did love the fact that you hit page 95, middle of the page. I think you could have hit almost all of page 94, but you know.
Yeah. Yep. That's the hard part. So the section among the months, you know, on page 93 is really is actually super important. But it's really hard for us to wrap our mind around this thing that he's talking about.
Without actually.
Yeah. So he says, he's talking about just the embeddedness of the goodness of life in the cycles of the seasons or the cycles of the year, the calendar or the cycles that God impressed into the world are something that we've kind of forgotten, because I think I was just talking to somebody about the way the population in Las Vegas is growing right now. He's like, that doesn't even make any sense. Las Vegas is the worst place in the world to live, just in terms of weather. It's like, oh yeah, except for I guess air conditioning has defeated the weather. So you can live in Vegas, and even though it's 109 degrees for like 4 months out of the year, you can live there because air conditioning, electricity. We figured out how to make electricity defeat the weather of Vegas, which is a good thing, but it does have a separating effect from some of we have to purposefully then lean into some of the wisdom of creation, because we have taken dominion over it in certain aspects. But here he talks about it's lusty spring with its thousands of singing birds, and jolly summer, and even autumn joyed in the plenteous store. Among the months, the emphasis is even more striking. April is wanton as a kid, June is jolly, and October is full of merry glee, tipsy with wine that made him so frolic and so full of lust. And lust is a good thing in this context, right? It's a full, it's a full focused desire. So, wanton lust is when we want the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Wanton means like wandering, so and so because of the nature of the current setting, we can't think of lust as a good thing. A full desire, an undivided desire, is not something that we ever experience. Right? So we there's nothing that we have a full undivided desire for anymore. And here that it's talking about how each month gives a different thing that we can give our full desire to in a good way. And so, yeah, October is full of merry glee, tipsy with the wine that made him so frolic and so full of lust, is succeeded by a November who took no small delight in planting, and a December who made merry feasting, gladdened by the memory of his Savior's birth. And then as for May, Lord, how all creatures laughed with her, when her they spied, and leapt and danced as they had ravished been. Right. So you think of the joys, and it's all they're all images of love, all images of a fruitful love, the kind of love that a husband and a wife have for one another. That's the image between the image of the seasons, that because creation is constantly defeating resurrection in its cycles, or defeating death in its cycles of resurrection, right? So embedded into the world is love overcoming death, right? Embedded into the seasons is love overcoming death. Death keeps trying to sneak in, but love defeats it every year, each month, even in a different way. Love defeats death. It's just invisible to us, and so this is where, you know, I know when we talked about Chaucer, we talked about this some as well, but this is so important for parenting, right? Because we this is one of our main jobs, is to teach kids how to deal with the desires that come upon them, how and not, instead of tamping them down, how to direct them, right? Because the desires come upon, desires for love come upon teenagers like a grenade, and they explode in every direction, and they don't know what to do with it. And we say, well, no, let's take the desires, let's aim them well, let's get them into the gun, and turn them into a sniper with those desires. Let's focus those desires, because when we focus the desires onto the proper thing, so they're no longer wandering desires, but they're focused desires, it turns out that Jesus is right behind every one of those things, right? So when you aim your desires for the thing that that you're supposed to, that God is hiding himself right there, and so you discover God is the ultimate fulfillment of every one of those desires, because he's hidden himself behind the thing he's told you to aim that desire at, right? So you want to go out and earn money and get respect, and if you do it the right way, through being honest and serving people, right, you discover that that God is right behind all of that, because he is the great provider, right? And so you discover, by the means of providing for other people with that desire for money and respect and all of that, when you focus that on providing for other people, working hard with my hands so I can be generous, right, you find that God is hiding in the generosity. God, and you meet God in a new way, and opportunities to be generous that you wouldn't have been able to if you hadn't worked so hard and focused that desire, focused that the full-throated desire that you used to be able to call lust, that you can't anymore. So I think there's this really, really, I mean, it's the same reason we don't build cathedrals anymore, right? We don't have a cosmology that can support and justify the building of a cathedral, and so we move into strip mall. We move the church into strip malls, because we think that the church is just that our main competitor is the Gap, that we can't tell the difference between evangelism and advertising anymore, because of our cosmology.
Or we just think that the church just doesn't have much of a importance here on earth. Right?
Right. Yeah.
That's the other side of that really starting to bother me, is there's no significant thing that the church is on earth, right? But this goes back to the rule and reign of Christ. Like, that is a horrible thought. Like, the church is not gathering to escape; it's planting because it's taken over, right? That's the narrative that's being missed in this.
And I mean, as we talked too, I think it's a fifth commandment issue as well, in the sense that we don't build things that we can pass on. We don't
like what our parents gave us. We don't like what historically, we don't like what they've given us. Yeah. I look at America. Look at America. Look how we're treating it. Like, we don't like what they've given us, right? Yeah.
So, but we need, that. Yeah, I think that there's so many things that you could say are the heart of the issue, but a big one is the rivalry between the generations. We've accepted that as if it's normal, expected. It's the thing that happens. But we're commanded to not allow it.
You know, as you were saying that, I was just thinking about Paul Johnson. You started breaking this down for me, I think almost 2 years ago now, when we started talking about Gnostic. No, probably longer, but we started recording them 2 years ago. We started talking about Gnosticism and the effect it's had on our society, and metaphysics and the breakdown of that. And Gnosticism and metaphysics was where you started really like planting the flag at. And during that time, one of the things that came up in the conversation was the post-World War I/II consensus, and how it really fractured our cosmological understanding of the world. And there were things that were going on before, but that's when we actually made the trade, maybe in our society.
Yeah.
We really made the full trade on. And a lot of people that have moved over to kind of the hardcore Christian nationalist groups have come to understand that reality, but maybe not in total, but at least in part, and understand that being a huge moment that we had this post-World War II consensus, populism, multiculturalism, and all that stuff just flushed our system, like just went right rapid through it. And so there is a sort of, like you say, fifth commandment violation here, an anger with our forefathers that they would allow, because we're waking up to, I remember, man, it took me a second. I remember coming out of the charismatic church. When I came out, there was a point of me that was angry because they didn't teach us and feed us and give us the words that we needed to be able to manage our families and all this stuff like that, all our doctrine. And I remember it took me a while before I was able to be mature enough to say, what they gave me was the reason why I was able to leave the charismatic church. Right. And then God used every bit of that to bring me where I'm at now. And I was so unthankful that I was upset and angry at them instead of having a heart with the image of good. It was like, wow, look what God did with all that. God sanctified me. I learned to love his standards and love him. And then he just kept building on top of that more and more and more and more and more. And so I want everybody else to have that too now, right? But it seems like this new group of people that are somewhat inside the CN group, and not all of them, but at least a large sector of them are angry that we have dropped the ball so much historically. And I think there's some valid arguments to be made that there was some balls dropped.
Yeah.
But not
absolutely.
But not to be a Calvinist in the moment and see the opportunity that's available was foolish. Right? That's a form of immaturity to see that and to say, well, this is a story that God put us in, and he did it in a particular way so he can receive the most amount of glory. So where do I jump in and start working? And we've talked about this so many times here on this particular podcast, where one generation takes the boat as far as they can and they crash it. And then that generation says, okay, we're further than we were here. Okay. Then they take the boat, then they're going to crash. And the next generation, and eventually the way that's a form of sanctification, right? And whatever God is, and this is why you can't be Gnostic about this, because whatever God is doing in history is bringing it all to a culmination of glory. So wherever you are in this, you're like, oh, how is, I talk about this a little bit, but you should be excited to say, ooh, I wonder how God is going to use this for his glory. What does faithfulness look like in this messed up situation that we got, that God is going to be like, like, wow, God, you tell the best stories. So good. Right. Or like you say, hey, when you see yourself getting nailed in the coffin and they put extra nails in and latches, and then they super glue the whole thing with tar or whatever, like, and you're wrapped in there, you're like, oh, God's going to pull one off on this one. This is going to be a crazy one right here. I wonder how he's going to do it, but that's not that we see, because we're so angry, we're almost, making things worse than a situation that we've been given.
Yeah. Two things. One, my wife will be driving past like the construction of a new public school system, and she'll see it, and she says things like, you go on and build us that building.
There you go.
We'll get it eventually, right?
That's
So
right.
which
That's right.
I love that attitude. She's always like, "Ooh, what do you think God's going to use that building for?" Or like, "Ooh, we could use that building. We should start praying for it." She always says stuff like that, which I love. But oh man, now I can't remember the other thing I was going to say. I think it's such a different way it's a different set of expectations almost. I remember what the other thing was. I remember Doug and Greyfriars talking about how if you encourage people to disrespect the churches that they were in beforehand, then eventually
wow.
you'll be one of the churches that they've left in disrespect, right? So you always encourage them to honor and respect whatever church they were in before, whatever church they grew
That's
up in.
good. That's good.
It's just because that's what we're told to do. So that if they were raised in an Arminian church, then he said the question you ask is, well, what were the good things? What were the good things you learned? Like, are they the ones that taught you to honor the Bible? Because if they are, then you should honor them for that. What are the good things?
That's right.
Rather than always trying to, a lot of churches, you feel like you should position yourself over against their previous church, as if, now they've finally gotten here, but it's not good for their soul to think that way, right? Their soul should be grateful. It's good for their soul to be grateful, I guess is a better way to put it. That was one of the many things that I learned from Doug about this sort of thing.